Hello and welcome to the Parenting Connection podcast. We are here to bring the information you need to help you rediscover moments of joy in parenthood in a way that's simple and meaningful for you and your child. Parenting is hard, but we are here now, so we might as well make the most of it. How can we do that? Well, it all starts with this podcast. Hello, Kate. How are you?
Hello, Maria. Lovely to be here.
Great. Kate, tell us how you got into Forest School. What triggered that decision, or how did you get there?
I grew up very close to nature. I attended a Waldorf school, and nature was part of every aspect of my education and development, even though at the time we lived in Dublin, in the city. And it was always on my agenda to have a programme that was linked to nature for children. I didn't become aware of the imperative of it, or the kind of the depth of the need, until I started teaching in classrooms, and was really taken aback by the lack of awareness, of knowledge, of opportunity that the children that I worked with had. Equity of access to nature was a big issue. And I remember a particular moment where we were on a bus with a class going out to a little retreat, and a lot of these children weren't used to being on a bus, weren't used to being on a country road, and they were looking out the windows, and suddenly there was a cow, and they were, there's a cow, and I looked out the window, and it wasn't a cow.
No way.
It was a piebald pony. So it was black and white, but it was a pony.
Oh.
And on that same trip, children who were 12, who had said they were bitten, and when I looked at them, I asked them, where did that happen? And they pointed at a patch of nettles, and they didn't know that they were nettles. So I really started to become aware that there was a missing link there. And because so much of my experience had been implicit, I didn't credit any of the skills and the knowledge that I'd accumulated over the years.
Just take it for granted.
Yeah, to my time in nature. I didn't understand that. And so I started researching a bit more about this. And it really crystallized for me that what I wanted to provide to children was this time and space in nature. And of course, COVID has to play a part in this. I was very lucky in a way during COVID in that I was in a private teaching position. The job that I had, I was given a lot of trust in how I managed the education of the child I was working with. And we were in a very beautiful place outside for the entirety of a year. And I could ground a lot of the curriculum that I designed for this child in what was going on outside. And it really showed, and I saw how different that was. And when I came back to Ireland, I was very set on...
Where was that?
So this was in this particular... School of one was in Greece.
Okay.
I came back to Ireland with a kind of a very renewed connection to nature and a real strength of purpose. And I ran into a few people who said, I think what you're talking about is Forest School. And I said, oh no, I don't think so, because my very limited knowledge of what Forest School was and my prejudices was about, that somebody takes a bunch of kids out to the forest and they let them run wild.
Yeah.
And I am all for balancing boundaries with freedom, that for children, the freedom of expression, the creativity, everything like that happens within boundaries that are held by an adult.
Safety, yeah.
Yeah. I went to do a training course, and within the first 3 hours of the training course, these wonderful women Elizabeth and Carol, who worked with Huathe Forest School training, just blew my mind. They went through all of these things I'd been looking at about psychology, about risky play, about human evolutionary behaviour, about anthropology, about building community, about sustainability, about the imperative of renewing our connection with nature in order to ensure the survival of the planet and the species. All of this stuff just blew my mind. And within 3 hours of being on that residential course, I had signed up as an assistant. I went to Elizabeth and I said, I need to do the whole thing.
Wow. What's the impact that this connection and understanding and experience with, for and from nature has in us growing up? Like, how does that reflect, or what are the things we learn from it that we wouldn't otherwise, like not knowing what a nettle is or why I got stung by, like how does that make our life better or worse?
I think the best way of answering that is looking at, so we have 6 forest school principles that underlie what any forest school leader will do. And every forest school practitioner runs things differently because they're working in a different environment, they're working in a different context, they're working with different children. But these 6 principles stay the same. And one of those is around holistic development. Now, kind of as a legacy of New Age thought, when you say the word holistic, people think about chakras and meditation and things like that. We're not talking about holistic in that. We're talking about holistic as a whole. So for children, looking through what nature does for you, we're talking about physical benefits. So things as simple as building muscles or building your stamina or working on your muscle memory. Working on coordination and balance, on your fine and gross motor skills. We're looking at things like senses that are often overlooked. So, for example, your proprioception, your idea of where you are in space. Your interoception, what is going on inside your body. And you'll see with children sometimes, especially 4, 5, 6-year-olds, when they come into forest school, they spend a lot of time on their tummies, or they spend a lot of time lying down across logs or on their swings. And that's because this pressure that applies on your torso really highlights what is going on in your organs. And you get used to how those feelings feel. And you notice them and you listen to them. And this is something that I wish somebody had told me when I was younger, that if you learn how to listen to those feelings, so it's not just your needs of hunger or thirst or, this is what it feels like when I need to go to the toilet. It's also, this is what it feels like when I'm relaxed. This is what it feels like when I'm anxious. Mm-hmm. This is what it feels like when something is not right. Like, I don't know what it is, but it's not right. And as a woman, I wish somebody had told me as a child, when you feel that something isn't right in your gut, that's enough. You can listen to that feeling and you can act on it. Other senses that we're talking about, things like vestibular, which is to do with your balance, often not allowed for in any other forum, definitely not on the curriculum in school. Also things like, if you look at children in school who are working on their hip reflexes, so there's a lot of wriggling going on, and they have these special things.
Cushions,
so that wriggle reflex that you have in your hips. Now, your lovely Babog lady would be able to tell you what this is. I can't remember the name for it, but it's something that we are born with to wriggle out of the birth canal. It's essential for our survival. And the idea is that within the first few months you lose it because you've spent time on your babies, spend time on their tummy, they spend time rolling around, and eventually it's worked out. That doesn't happen for a lot of children now. And that's not through lack of awareness of parenting. That's because, for example, if you have a single parent family, where's the time in there for the parent to have a blanket out on the floor and sit with their child for 2, 3, 4 hours a day? Like, there are, the kind of the pressures and the pace of modern life have rendered a lot of what children would have done naturally, what is in their DNA to work through. Our bodies know how to grow up. And we don't allow that anymore. The society that we're in doesn't allow the space for that. Other areas that forest school would really, really support in. Emotional is a big one. So not just understanding the feelings in terms of your interoception, but developing empathy and sympathy with others and with nature, because nature is treated in forest school as I'm not going to say as a being, but for example, we have a grandmother tree. Now, these are sometimes called guardian trees, Shanwa or Corinna. They're called lots of different things, but it's a personification of what nature is. And you introduce the children to this tree and you ask permission at the start. And that grounding for building of empathy, we don't own this space. Everything in this space has a right to be here. And, you know, we're here by permission. And seeing, I've had children who've come from every walk of life, up to like, you know, they're in their, coming into their teenage years. And if you had told them at the start, come on in, we're going to talk to a tree here, they'd be like, oh, that's not you. And within 2 weeks, they're bringing her things. You know, it's just really building this empathy, this connection. And it also builds on the communication. So there's a lot of opportunities for shared time, having a fire in forest school. And even when there's no fire, there's still a fire circle. That we have a little opening at the start where they can talk about what they're looking forward to. That we work out a lot of like verbal and non-verbal communication. So for example, when they're playing with each other on the hammock, it's really important, you know, the rule is that you have to be able to see the person's face if you're swinging them. So you know if they're having a good time. And if you're not sure, what do? We ask, is this okay? A lot of seeking permission, verbal permission around games, around contact, which in this society today I think is incredibly important. And that builds also on the social relationships, both between children and between children and adults. There's a big thing there about they find that these adults are different. You know, children will come in and they'll start saying, teacher, can I? And I say, where? There's no teacher here. So, you know, they're building a slightly different relationship with the adults in their life of trust without the authority. And a lot of intellectual knowledge as well. So it's not just knowing that nettles sting. It's knowing that nettles come from rhizomes underneath the ground. It's knowing about the amount of biodiversity that a single nettle patch can support. It's knowing that you can use nettles to make tea as a kind of a spinach substitute in pretty much everything. You can use the nettle stems to make cordage. So there's a huge amount of awareness that comes with understanding the value of it's not just green, it's not just plants, it's not just weeds. Actually, all of these have a job and a purpose and can be utilised in different ways.
That's massive for your creativity and thinking outside the box skills, isn't it?
Huge, absolutely huge. And if you look at what recruiters are saying they want from, if you look at top recruiting companies, the sort of qualities that they're looking for in their young people coming into industries, they are those kinds of things. They're thinking outside the box.
Absolutely.
Their creativity, their problem solving, self-awareness, emotional skills, all of these so important in order to be successful in business, because that's their end. But, you know, I'd argue just in general, in order for the world to be heading in the right direction, you need all of those things.
Maybe that's the problem. We need more forest schools.
I would love that. And there's another aspect of forest schools as well, which we touched on a little bit there, which is a spiritual aspect. And this is an interesting word because, again, it's a word that's sometimes misunderstood. So when we talk about spirituality in forest school, we're not talking about paganism. We're not talking about specific religious celebrations or festivals, although we do talk about that a lot. The children who come in can bring their own experiences. You know, they can talk about the fact that in November so many cultures have festivals of lights because it's dark and we're going into the darkest time of the year and it's a bit scary. So actually making lanterns makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, to remind us that even in the depths of winter we do have our light. And also looking at, you know, this kind of like a sense of awe, making space for the children where they have, for example, a little sit spot where they can go and be by themselves for a while. And you have a sense of something bigger than yourself. And that's not scary because you also experience that with a sense of connection and a sense of belonging, which again, the pace of modern life does not always allow for. and also looking at death and loss and regrowth. So for children who may have not experienced bereavement before, they find a bumblebee. Often we find like a dead bumblebee, and they want to have a funeral. I don't lead it. They want to do something nice. They want to make a little space somewhere for this animal and put a few little flowers or a leaf or something somewhere special away. And, you know, we talk about how that bumblebee had a very busy life and has done his job.
Indeed.
And actually now, for example, we won't actually bury him because he still has a job to do. So that you know, even though it's so tiny, there's other little insects that can get dinners from that.
Yeah.
And also looking at change from an emotional perspective, also from a spiritual perspective. So this long-term principle of Forest School that children come to the same, and I'm saying children, but this is also young adults, this is also adults, this is also little babies who come, and they come to the same place throughout all the seasons. So they get used to the fact that in winter it looks different, and that's okay. And then they get used to, they see the first dandelion, they get really excited because, okay, we can't take the dandelion just yet because it's got a really important job to do at the moment, but as soon as we've got loads of them, we can make dandelion honey and dandelion tea, and they look forward to that. So change rather than being something...
And patience.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Just this longer term view of chronology, of looking at time and cycles that, you know, for a lot of what we are doing today, it's very linear based, it's very process, you know, it's a linear process and outcome driven, and actually taking a step back from that and saying, well, no, I mean, time in so many ways is cyclical, and it removes the pressure from them, and also means that when change happens in their own lives, it's maybe not as upsetting because they understand that, like, surface change can happen, and underneath things, it's the same site, things can stay the same.
Yeah. And that's really good for their resilience as well.
Resilience is a huge thing. So willow, which is in Irish, it's Salia, and some people call it Sally. It's in Latin, it's salix. And the salix is the same root, etymologically, of the word resilience. Okay. It comes from the willow. So this, because the willow is incredibly resilient. It can grow and regrow so easily.
Wow. So
we talk about how resilience means, you know,
you're getting stronger.
You're able to adapt. You know, you can bend a little bit when you need to. And allowing the children time for that, again, long-term principle. They come in at the start and they want to be up there in the tree. They want to be all the way up there, and they're like, give me a leg up. And you just say, no, that's not your tree yet. And you watch them over the course of a year. And every session, they're a little bit braver. They go a little bit higher. And they learn that, you know, immediate gratification is not always the thing. Sometimes it's just
worth the wait.
By little, yeah. And they feel, I mean, they're feeling when they get up the top, like, I'm used to now children screaming at me from the top of trees, and it doesn't mean that they're stuck. It means, come and take a photo. I want to show my mom I got up here finally. They're so proud because they did it by themselves. Yeah. And that's hard, because it's hard as an adult to stand back and watch this child.
That's one of the hardest things as an adult. Yeah. Not to offer help before they actually need it. Encourage them to try and keep trying and do it by themselves.
Yeah. And you're able to, you know, it doesn't mean that you just leave them sink. You know, you're able to offer a little bit of advice, like you're able to say
guidance, but not doing it for them.
You know, maybe if we moved it 6 inches to the left, you might have a better chance of reaching that next branch. But not doing it for them. And it's funny because children come in at the start, and often, if they've never been in forest school before, they come in and they
help me.
Sometimes it's a very direct order, like, do this, and you say, that's actually not my job. And they look at you like, huh?
How dare you?
Yes. And, you know, and saying that's something to look forward to. That's something for you to look forward to next term. You know, we're not there yet, but we will be.
That's really good. How important is risky play for the development of the children?
Oh my gosh, huge. I'm not going to credit this quote correctly, but it's basically play that doesn't make you gasp as an adult is not worthwhile.
I love that.
And I guess what that comes down to, again, it is not this thing of children are allowed to run wild. We know our sites inside out and back to front. We know which trees are safe to climb. We've talked to the children about how you climb safely. And, it's very hard for them to get out of their depth very quickly because we don't put them in situations immediately where they would be out of their depth. So children learn how to take appropriate risk with support, with guidance. So, for example, the majority of what our risk, we do risk-benefit analysis. And the first thing you have to do before you do the risk bits is write down, why is this important?
That's so positive, isn't it?
Yeah. So it's a full A4 page on the benefits.
Instead of focusing on the negative risk assessment, but they can fall, but they can break their heads, but they can... No, but how much
the benefits of that.
Yeah, I love that.
So benefits of tree climbing, the benefits of tool use, the benefits of foraging, the benefits of fire. And that's not just having a fire for the children. That's teaching the children how to light their own fires. And most of our mitigation in terms of the risks is awareness, both on the part of the adult and the child, supervision, and education. Very little of it is we mitigate by removing the risk entirely, because who does that help? There's a really interesting kind of longitudinal study done on forest school participants now, because it's still a relatively new movement in the UK and Ireland. There's kind of a paucity of hard research. Most of the research that's been done is kind of anecdotal. But this piece of research does show that forest school participants are more likely to have a healthier relationship with drugs and alcohol as adults.
Why is that?
Because they understand the risks. They know that in terms of my risk reward quadrant, where you have high risk, low risk, high reward, low reward, we know where to take our risks. We know how far to take our risks. We know when enough is enough. And you can apply that to all sorts of other situations. Like what we teach in forest school with the children, it's a small cosmos of what can be immediately experienced and what they can have a direct relationship with. But everything that they learn in that small space is applicable to
all areas.
The experiences they're going to have in the wider world. So you do see children like you have. So one of the questions I get a lot with new parents is they want to drop in the middle of term, and they can't. They have to come at the start of term, because by the time you are 4 or 5 weeks in, you have a group of children who understand the site, who've had education around how we climb, what are appropriate risks to take.
And there's a process.
How do we listen to our feelings when there is a process there. And if you have a child who comes in the middle and they've never had that freedom before, they're the ones who are going to throw themselves in way too deep. And because that's not, because you're holding the group in a different way now, 4 or 5 weeks in, it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
So you can really see that with children who haven't had the experience. From our experience, the children who are held the most tightly, the most protected, they come in and they go one of two ways. One is they don't want to do anything. Everything's scary. They don't want to do anything. Terrifying. It's wet. It's dirty. Yeah. And the other is they're a loose cannon, and you have to be behind them, 3 feet behind them for their first 3
Here's
sessions.
My chance.
Yes. Yeah. You just, it's, and, that's fine. That's part of the process. It's just we have to work through it together.
Yeah. So I think autonomy is a really big one as well here, and giving them that power of choice.
Yes.
And decision making is what makes them more aware and less. They don't need, to get attention as much, or it's just they have that choice themselves, and they feel fulfilled because they will listen to their own voices. I think that's so important.
Yeah. When they come to you and say, so for example, something is introduced as an activity they might like to try, and somebody comes and they say, I don't want to do it. And you say, that's okay. let's have a look at what else is here. And they're a bit taken aback because they're used to having things scheduled, that we do this and then this and this. So school for them is things that we do. It's not really optional.
Yeah.
And you look at a child coming in and, whatever the age they are, if they're at the stage of their development where they're still working, for example, they're still working on their proprioception, they haven't figured out where their hands are yet. They're 7, 8, and they still don't know where their body is in space because they've never had that freedom to do. And so they're going to be involved in a lot of gross motor skill play, a lot of swinging on ropes, a lot of dragging things from here to there. So trying to get that child to sit down and do a beading craft, there's no point in that. They're not there yet. So having this, it is quite kind of Montessori style in terms of what is on. These are the things that are on offer.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you do get parents go, like, I signed up for a summer camp. Where are all my crafts? Well, your child didn't want to do any crafts. They wanted to be completely wild and play in the mud for 4 days. So that's where they're at.
Yeah, it's all about expectations.
Yes.
And thinking, the more books they have, the more they're learning. Well, not really. That's not really how it works. The more homework they do, the more no, really. The more dysregulated they are.
Yeah. So there's a real, when the engagement comes, or when they ask you for things to do things, or when they want to join in with something, they really want it. Because
it's their intrinsic motivation. Yeah,
they've made that choice themselves.
How did you assess? Would you do an assessment of their needs and then provide more of it to support those needs and interests, or would you just let them? Or how do you come up with a plan? Because there has to be a plan.
There has to be a plan. Yes. Fail to plan and plan to fail. So this is a balancing act. As a forest school leader, you are a tightrope walker. And I believe that this is how all teachers should be allowed to work. But they're not.
In an ideal world.
So you have, like one of our forest school principles, again, is the principle of professional leadership. You're a qualified professional. You have your huge bank of personal experience. You have your bank of knowledge, and that can be to do with plant lore. It can be to do with child psychology. It can, be to do with your skill set, your practical skills, your bushcraft skills. So you have that big bank to draw on to feed the interests of the children. And that is sometimes in the moment, there's a huge amount of creativity involved. That you've got something planned and the child comes to you with a leaf of something and says, what's this? And you say, I wonder where that came from. And suddenly the lesson you planned is not happening. Mm-hmm. You're looking at ivy and all the things that can happen with ivy. And that's where you would draw on your skills. But the bank of activities, now Forest School is an amazing community, and Forest School practitioners share a lot of their skills and their ideas with each other. So you do go into a term with an overall plan of what it is that you would like to do with this group, where you'd like to be towards the end, week 7,
It's more
8.
like goal setting and then work backwards. And how do I?
A little bit, yeah. But it's also in response to the environment that you're in. So some sites will have lots of elder trees, some won't. So, what's happening in one is not going to happen in another. Some sites will have a river, some won't. So again, different opportunities there. And also the first session that you would do with a whole new group, you wouldn't plan beyond the first session. You've planned the first session, you put it, out as much as you can, and you watch. And you see what is it that piques their interest? What is it that they're engaged in? What are they struggling with? And then one of our really important closing things, and I'm actually quite explicit with the children about this. So when we open our circle, we give our name. We tell the circle our name. We choose a forest animal or a spirit animal or a nature name. I call them like an anamphia and a wild name. And this is a really good indicator because 5-year-olds will come in and they'll tell you that they're a rabbit, they're a rabbit, they're a rabbit, and then one day they're a gorilla, and you're like, ooh,
just got bigger.
Okay, let's keep an eye on this today. And they say what they're looking forward to, and that gives you a really good indicator. So I'm looking forward to this, I'm looking forward to this. And also as an adult, you can introduce, oh, I'm looking forward to making one of these. And then a child will tell you they're looking forward to something that wasn't on your list. So you're like, okay, I have to go and organise that. I wasn't planning on putting up the hammock, but this child is looking forward to it. So let's go put up the hammock. Another child might tell you, I've had it. I'm looking forward to escaping. So we're like, okay. So the first thing we're going to do is like three back-to-back boundary games. So they don't know they're about the boundaries, but they are about, this is how far we can go in the forest. This is the space that is safe. This is how you come back when I call you. All based through games.
Why would they want to escape?
This particular child, I don't think he was genuinely interested in being an escapee. I think he was more interested in the shock value of it.
Interesting.
But, you know, it's again, it's something that when you say to people, we don't have a fence around the space. You know,
it's
we have
about
a space.
Trust. Our trust is our fence. Yeah.
So building that relationship with children. So we have the boundaries marcated with I use little ribbons. So there's a huge amount of work going in at the start in terms of games of, can you go find the boundaries? How many can you find? Where are they? Can you go as far as you can, as quick as you can, you know, before you hit the boundary? Like all of these about, we know where our safe space is. And then at the close of the circle, closing circle again at the very end, we say what we really enjoyed. And that again feeds into my plan of, okay, they really enjoyed this activity. We can't repeat exactly the same activity next week. Sometimes we can if it's a game or, you know, but if it's a particular craft activity. But so what else can I come up with that will draw on the same interests, that will get the same engagement, that, you know, that is meeting them where they're at? Why do they really like that? And that's where your kind of professional experience and expertise comes in, that, you know, okay, if they've managed that, what's next?
Yeah. What is the first easiest thing that a teacher in mainstream traditional school could take away from a forest school ethos and bring it into the classroom?
Oh, wow.
Like, say, if they could pick just one thing to get started on and having a more meaningful approach to the children in the way they interact in the classroom and the way they teach and learn, what would that be? Just like, say, one step today, you know, taking one little step every day. So what would be the first step they could take?
I would look at creative play and autonomy. Because we look at Ashtar and we say that's for junior infants.
Mm-hmm.
That needs to be the whole way up through the school. And I'm going to say even in secondary school as well. There needs to be a time in the day where it's possible for this group of peers to choose what it is they are doing and who they're doing it with. And it will take a lot of patience because the setting is different. You will have children, you know, who, you know, what do I do? if they don't, you know, if they don't have to do anything. Bored. Yeah, yes, exactly.
You need instructions because that's the brain is wired to be like, okay.
And I do get that. Like some children come in at camps and they're like, I'm bored. And I'm like, that's okay. Whenever you want to do something, you come let me know and we'll find something to do. But it's that initial, you need to not, if child says like they're bored, that you don't feed them. You don't, you wait for that.
For teacher, that's for parents especially as well. Yeah.
For parents it's hard, and for teachers it's so hard because you are, as a teacher,
becoming really more entertainers now, isn't it? Teachers.
It's so outcome driven, and you know,
it's so hard.
Basically, with finite resources of time, energy, finance, everything, you're expected to meet an infinite need. Mm-hmm. There will always be more that you can do, and it's very difficult for teachers who care.
Yeah, who care. That's the thing. Yeah,
it's a really difficult. You know, and sometimes, like as a teacher, I was asked once by a partner, could you not just care a little bit less? And then it wouldn't upset you so much, this level of need that you're trying to fill. And the answer is no. Like, if you're a teacher, you're in it for the right reasons. Yeah. So I think it wouldn't just be to teachers, it would be to management. It would be that you need to have a longer term view.
Yeah.
If you're working to tests at the end of 3-4 month terms, it's you're really going to be limited in what you can achieve because not everything that can be measured has value. The stuff that can be tested, not all of it has value. And definitely, the things that have value can't be measured. You can't put that as a metric on a spreadsheet. And that's a real challenge. Like, how do we prove that this practice is going to produce an adult who is better emotionally regulated, who can support their community in a better way, who's going to take actions to ensure a sustainable and equitable future for themselves, for their communities, for the world? Like, how can you prove that some soft activity that you're doing is going to produce that? Because that's 30 years in the future. And I'll
come back to you 30 years later. I can't make decisions. Yeah. And how do we set boundaries? So I believe boundaries are very important, and you invest a lot of time in setting boundaries.
Yes.
So how do we do that? And how important it is?
It's incredibly important. I think we had a kind of a reactionary period in parenting. And I always say these things with a huge caveat because I am not a parent. I know only what I have experienced as a teacher. We had a lot of people growing up without a lot of choice. And they then became parents, and they wanted their children to have everything. And they wanted their children to have a choice, in terms of autonomy, in terms of supporting their independence. And yes, absolutely, choice is important for children. But the term is it's controlled choice. It's choice within
limits.
Within limits.
Yeah.
It's not asking a 4-year-old, what do you want for your dinner?
Yeah.
It's asking a 4-year-old, would you like carrot sticks or cucumber?
Yeah. That's
a choice. And it's a common misconception in forest school, and I know this because I had it myself, that there is no boundaries. There are no boundaries. That there's it's just a bit of a free for all. And I sometimes joke with people when they say, now not with potential parents, but when they say, so what is it that you do? And I said, well, basically, we take a group of children out to the forest and we leave them with their fire tools and their knives, and we come back in the week and whoever's still there.
It's a win.
Yeah, that is absolutely not what we do. Having choices within limits is part of the boundaries. Adults being adults is very important. And yes, sometimes you can engage on a more childlike level in order to engage the children. So for example, if at the start of a game, somebody is, a group is, especially if they're like 10, 11, 12-year-olds, and it's not that cool, I will start playing the game with my assistant because...
it's contagious.
Yeah, it's a bit contagious. But as soon as it's caught on, I will step back and I will hold space, because if an adult is not watching there and the children are working towards this adult's energy, it's out of their league. And that's when you'll have accidents. And some adults can be a little bit confused about this sometimes, as in, they're like attempting to relive missed childhood opportunities.
Yeah.
No, somebody has to be an adult. And if you have your forest school, your forest school staff there, if somebody's doing that, there is someone else holding space. And by holding space, I mean being in a position where they can see what is going on, where they're kind of the stationary, grounded person, so that if anything starts to go wrong, they'll pick up on it straight away. They're the person who's holding. There's a thing in Waldorf education about form and freedom. And the freedom is the creativity. The freedom is what people see when they look at forest school, when they look at Waldorf education. Children literally running free, children creatively expressing themselves, all of that thing. And what they don't see is the form that's held behind that. And that is not about telling children, you are not allowed to do this, you are not allowed to do this. It's that every single session, at the start of the session, for the first 5 weeks, we play a game. Repetition, routine.
The structure.
That's the structure. And because of that game, you know exactly where it is that you're allowed to be and not allowed to be. You remind each other where you're allowed to be and not allowed to be. And the setting of ritual and routine is so integral to holding boundaries, so integral to holding space. if you get to the end of a 2-hour session, for example, and the children have been playing, and you say, okay, we're finished, get your bags, pack up, go home. What you will have is children who will try and go and hide because they don't want to go home. You'll have children who will start arguing because they didn't get a go on the thing they've been waiting for. You'll have children who, for many, you know, basically all of their energies they're sky high, they're playing, and suddenly it's like, bam, go, we're done, leave.
That's really unfair when you look at it this way, isn't it? Yeah.
So, 20 minutes before the session ends, 25 minutes before the session ends, we call in. Come and sit at the circle. It's time to have a chat.
Yeah.
We have some tea. We talk about the things we enjoyed. Sometimes we might even have a story. Sometimes we have a sit spot where we go and, you know, just find a favourite tree to sit under and finish our tea. And then we come back in. And we're now, the next thing to look forward to is the last thing. We go and say goodbye to the grandmother tree and say thank you. So every part of that is it's a ritual and routine that has been established. So you don't have those issues with boundaries. And then they've talked about, you know, the things they enjoyed and things they're looking forward to about next week. So they're leaving with a sense of satisfaction, a sense of contentment, and this anticipation as well for the next session.
Yeah.
There isn't a separation anxiety. There isn't the sense of losing out or that you missed something or that something wasn't fair.
And they get a space to share their own voice as well.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
So they don't have to be fighting for it. They know they're going to get it. That's really important.
Yeah. I mean, I think maybe this is another, I know you said only one, but this is something I think teachers probably do already and recognise the value of, that when you have your routines, it's not about discipline per se. It's not about you have to do it like this and this. They know that routines equals expectations being met.
Yeah.
If the children know how things are going to go, it's a lot easier to hold boundaries, to keep people safe. You know, so all of those things that are potentially dangerous about being outside, the things that parents would worry about, those risks are mitigated, not by saying no, you're not allowed, but by establishing those boundaries through games, through ritual and routine, through repetition.
And to see that they're then eventually setting their own boundaries, because as you said, they can recognise what's safe and what's not safe.
Yeah.
That's
very
amazing.
good. And it's, you know, like the language that we use, like if a child says, the first time we show them the knives, for example, for carving, and it's done as a little demonstration, and we talk through the reasons why we hold things a particular way. And often you'll have somebody come to you and they want to do it, but they're like, oh, I feel a bit scared.
Confidence.
Yeah, so the confidence is missing, but also they feel a bit scared. And you say, that's okay. That's a sensible feeling to have because it's something new. And also you know that it can be a bit dangerous. Mm-hmm. So this means you're going to be really careful, and that's a really good thing. Listening to, you know, don't be silly.
Yeah.
None to be afraid of. You're validating their feelings, you're hearing them, you're validating their feelings, and you're telling them, how can we use those? So fear is a good feeling to have in a scary situation. Safe, yeah. Listen to it, keep yourself safe. You know, if you're climbing and you start to feel a bit, good, that's time to stop. Yeah. Hang out there for a bit, and then, you know, let's come on down.
Absolutely, yeah. Imagine there's no fear, yeah. What's the situation of forest schools in Ireland?
Ooh, so
okay, say no more.
I'm new back in Ireland. I'm back in Ireland since 2021.
Okay,
and I'm part of the forest school community since 2022. And the forest school community has been just incredibly supportive in practical, in emotional, in so many ways. Ciara Hingsman, who's the godmother of forest school, and a lot of the other wonderful members of the IFSA board, the Irish Forest School Association board, they are unpaid. Like most of what they do voluntarily alongside running their own businesses. And when you know yourself, when you run your own business, it's not just what you do on the cover. It's all the furious paddling underneath, like in terms of
iceberg. Yeah.
You know, the marketing, the advertising, the publicising, the networking, all of that sort of stuff. And that's before we even get into planning and resourcing and site risk assessments. it's a huge amount of work, and the Irish Forest School Association are doing incredible work in supporting with almost no resources.
Wow.
In terms of funding, you know, it's very much up to the individual about whether they can go and successfully apply for Arts Council funding or for funding from Kildare leaders or from the libraries, all of whom are, in my experience, have been very generous. And, you know, what I'm seeing is that the individuals that I meet in those organisations see the value of Forest School and the community that it can build, especially with more vulnerable or harder to reach communities, especially with people who are newly arrived to this country, or people who have experienced trauma, or children with additional needs, or, you know, young people who are neurodivergent. All of those groups can benefit hugely. And what I'm seeing time and time again is wonderful individuals in these organisations who want to support, but it doesn't fit the paperwork, it doesn't fit the rubrics, it doesn't fit, you know, because again, the benefits are not quantifiable in terms of numbers. Yes. Yeah. So it's really frustrating. And so many people who train as Forest School leaders don't end up practicing because it's just such a huge burden to carry by yourself.
Are there any schools? Is it usually you run an after school?
So I run an after school, yeah.
And is there? Do we have any, like, say, forest primary schools in Ireland?
We don't have any. Well, we have. So, for example, there's the outdoor primary school in Greystones is trying to get up. There's a few independent school projects run in the west of Ireland as well, but they're run. Those ones are not run within the primary curriculum constraints because they are too prescriptive.
So it's like a homeschooling setting.
Yeah, basically, children who attend those schools are registered as homeschooled.
Homeschooled, yeah.
So, you know, I'm not sure that. Okay, what needs to happen in education is a whole other discussion. But I can tell you that, you know, when I go to schools, what I'm told is there is no money. Mm-hmm. There's no money for this. And I'm aware that it is more expensive because as a professional, as a teacher, you're paid to look after 30 kids. You can't do a forest school session with 30 kids. Just the kind of the numbers.
Do you mean as doing like a workshop in a school or something like that? Or
No, as a long-term forest school program.
Okay.
You have to do it in smaller groups.
Yeah.
So immediately it's a little bit more expensive. And you're not able, you can say these are all the benefits of forest school, but you can't guarantee that principle that you are going to hit all of these curriculum goals X, Y, and Z, because that's not what forest school is about. You know, if you get your group of children in at the start, you cannot say, I'm going to make sure that every single one of them can do X amount of knots by the end, can hold the thing. Because you're going to get a child in who's not there.
Yeah.
And you need to meet them where they are. So asking for 2 hours of curriculum time when there are huge demands already on teachers for what needs to be achieved in the time that they have their kids, and saying after a year of this, you'll never look back. It's too much of it. It's too much of an ask.
It's so sad, isn't it? That it feels like you're providing so much, but it feels like you're nearly wasting their time. Yeah,
it's tough.
And it's nothing because, as you said, it's so hard for teachers. It's the whole system and expectations and priorities.
Yeah, it's like saying, okay, you will if I have them for 2 hours every week, the quality of the learning that they will do back in the classroom because of their time outside it doesn't matter that it won't be more learning, like they won't do more pages of their books, but what they do,
it goes in.
Yes. Now, we have a lot of schools in Dublin that do pay for this, and this is funded through various different initiatives, sometimes through Parents' Council in schools in more affluent areas, sometimes through JESH, because so it's kind of ironic in a way that the need for this is being met at the extremes of the socio-economic kind of spectrum. That, you know, on one hand we have a school community and parents and families who are coming from pretty stable backgrounds and have a lot of privileges, and so those families are now looking at, okay, so what next in terms of this like Maslow's like, okay, self-actualization. How do we build their confidence? They're doing fine in their maths. How do we build their resilience? So we have that. And of course, that's nonsense because without resilience, without self-confidence, without creativity, you're not going to be able to do any of the basics. And then on the other hand, you have in the JET schools, children who don't have these opportunities and who are really struggling in classrooms. So that gives license to the school to take more kind of, in inverted commas, extreme measures of taking these children outside the classroom environment for 2 hours. There's a justification to it. But if you're doing okay, then
no need.
No need. And that's really disheartening.
Yeah.
In the UK, there are so many schools where Forest School is funded as part of their curriculum. Not with like
so would that
extra
be
assessment.
Subject?
But not with, like, yes, the Forest School leaders have to put it in their plans, but not with any of the things that we might be asked to do here. You don't have to take off their science objectives. You don't have to say, okay, we're meeting the needs of the, global citizenship education. Even though we are doing all those things, it's just recognised as something that has value.
And do you think that's going to happen here as well? The way things are going with a new curriculum, more play, more...
I really, really hope so. But I think there's... what I've experienced a little bit especially in areas around Naas, like young families have bought houses because they couldn't afford a house where they grew up, or because they couldn't get a job where they grew up, so they've had to get a job in Dublin and they can only afford the house here. So you have young families growing up without a support network. And that is basically cutting the line of ancestral knowledge right off. Like, our grandmother culture is disappearing. I had a grandmother come in to collect her child from my session the other day to explain to me why horse chestnuts are called horse chestnuts. And I didn't know this.
Wow.
And she broke a branch off the tree and she showed it to me and she said, you see here, when the leaves come off, they make a little shape of a horseshoe with the nails and everything. And I never knew that. But she picks her granddaughter up from school every day and her granddaughter knows this stuff.
We're losing that.
Yeah, and we're losing that because when we don't have, we're the only mammalian species where women live a third of their lives past their reproductive usefulness. And that's a very blunt way of putting it. But what it means is that for the last third of their lives, women and granddads too, they have so much knowledge and experience to pass on to their grandchildren. And it's done so implicitly that we never really noticed it was really happening. And so we are not noticing that we're losing it.
Wow. And
all it takes is a generation and it's gone. And it's something that really makes me concerned. As a kind of mainly agrarian society in Ireland, we had relationships with the land because we relied on it. We knew what plants were what. We knew what weather indicators were. We knew seasonal indicators, what would mean if things came late. We knew all of this stuff because we relied on it for our survival. And it was just part of life. And it's not anymore. We're isolated from it. And we've made the mistake of thinking that we don't rely on it anymore.
That's our ego.
I think
it's getting too big, isn't it?
Yeah, there is. And you can see there's a huge, for example, the emergence of forest bathing or the kind of sauna, pop-up saunas that have happened, or the wild swimming. We want it. We want that relationship with nature. We really do. But it shouldn't be the privilege of those who have the time and money and kind of geographical access to it. It's so integral for our survival, for our well-being. It really needs to be for every child. And it's the problem I have at the moment with running after-school clubs as opposed to running a curriculum in school, is that I'm only getting the kids whose parents are already making these choices.
Yeah.
I know that it's important for my child to spend time outdoors, and I'm choosing to send them to Forest School. I'm choosing to pick them up from school myself and drive them to a forest somewhere and pay for it and pick them up and bring them back. And you can only do that if you have certain resources. Just really fundamental foundation for so much of what we are trying to achieve as a society.
Just before we go, what's the one advice you'd give to anyone listening to take with them to make that small change?
Go out for a walk without your headphones.
Listen to the birds.
Just find a space.
It's so hard to be with your own thoughts, isn't it?
Oh, God, yeah.
I was listening to something the other day. They said they did a test and they testing half of the people and they all had a choice. You can be here in silence for an hour with yourself, just you, nothing else, in silence, or I can give you an electric shock and leave. And most people chose the electric shock. Shocking.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
How terrifying.
Yeah, it's something that is scary. We're overstimulated with information. There's just so much coming at us, which means we don't give ourselves the time to sit and process stuff that we really need to be processing. The deepest level creative thinking happens when we're in this kind of soft focus state, and we see this in forest school a lot. It's the afternoon period of camps. It's the slower time. It's the time when children are getting involved in actions that are kind of meditative, repetitive, so carving or stringing or and there's some chat going on. And while you're in this state of you're in a familiar place, your amygdala is like low. You have, because of your time in nature, your stress hormones, your cortisol, everything is dropped. So you're not in this kind of state of high alert. That's when your brain feels it's safe to kind of dig back through what's happened this week. That was kind of like this, and that makes me think of this, and maybe I could try that next time. Like there's so much that happens there that allows you to make connections and spot patterns and stuff that's going on in your life.
And come up with solutions.
Yeah. Allows you to build empathy, allows you to see things from a different angle that maybe you didn't consider before. And there's people who pay, you go to therapy and you pay $125 an hour for the privilege of that, but you can
have it for free.
You can also try and get comfortable sitting by yourself in nature.
There is a lot there that you said that just makes so much sense, and that we need to get back to basics. We've taken this too far. We need more and more and more. We're in this cycle where nothing is enough and nothing is good enough, and we need more, and when we don't really.
Yeah.
So it's really getting back to basics, connect with yourself, with your environment, and allow that time and space for children to do the same.
Exactly. I mean, for children, just less is better.
Yeah. Thanks so much. I'm going to go for a walk now.
Wonderful. Without headphones.
One thing
One
at a
step
time.
at a time.
Thanks so much.
Okay, good. Mira.
Thank you for listening to this episode. The Parenting Connection is a membership platform for all parents who want to make more conscious decisions when it comes to their parenting and children. You can find out more at theparentingconnection.com. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you'll never miss out on a new episode, because you never know what we're about to bring you. Let us take your parenting reality from tension and perfection to fun and connection.